talked for 3 or 4 hours already. Now we're going to get into the briefs. It's not a discussion because it'll take hours. But on the Enlightenment, on what comes to be modernism, and what develops by the 1980s, the euphemistic word of postmodernism enters the lexicon in American vocabulary in 1980. So what is, if you don't know modernism, you don't know what post is, because that means after it. Well, everybody has a euphemistic, well, is he liberal? Is he postmodern? Is he all these things? And see, if I had nothing else to do, I'd be sick and tired of hearing people make a dichotomy, a trichotomy like that. That's the only thing wrong with that is it's wrong. And so the first thing, everybody in every viewpoint, conscious or unconscious, has a worldview statement. There's no escape from that. They have a view, and I think James Sires, now I'm not enamored as some people are here with James Sires, but he has a very important book on discipleship of the mind. And I think these will stand up under scrutiny. And most of his books are not worldview analysis, they're results of worldviews. And I'm sick and tired of hearing them discussed as worldviews, because all those are results of worldviews. But anyway, he says in this great book on discipleship of the mind, because Pharisees came to Jesus and said, what is the greatest commandment? You know that. He says to love God with all your whole heart, your soul and mind. And that's nous, and that's your thinking apparatus. And without implying any concern about proof texting, in Romans 13, that says love God with your whole thinking apparatus. And Romans 13 said you worship God with your nous. So you love God that way and you worship God that way. That's what he says in Romans 13. So they wanted to know what is best. He said to love God with your whole heart, with the total being, not just IQ. This is what happens in rationalism. But a worldview always has an expression of a cognitive process or the ways of thinking. How people think, whether they're in sub-African Sahara, or whether they're in China, or doesn't make any difference. There's always, whether people are conscious of it or not, there's 7,200 languages and dialects, and I don't believe that they're all locked in Wittgenstein's language cage. But they always have a way of thinking, making sense out of their world. Well, that's a point of encounter with a worldview analysis. How do you think, and about what and why? Tell me that, and then I'll talk. A second thing is linguistic forms, the ways of expressing. You can always analyze these things. These are not just a freshman sermon for IDS or something. This is an analysis that you can put to the test. Ways of thinking, ways of thinking, and ways of expressing. Then a third way is a behavioral pattern, ways of acting. How and why do people act the way they do? Us or anybody else. And when they can explain why that's it, then we're talking about the foundation of the discussion. But if they're not clear, now I believe that everybody has one, whether they're clear about it or not. And the fourth is social structure, ways of interacting. Every culture has a way of relating internally. See, that's something that's studyable, it's scientifically examinable. Every one of these are examinable. They're not just a cure-all, oversimplification of highly complex problem. But then the social structure, then media influence, ways of channeling the message. Every culture, every language has a way of transmitting its information, whether it's personal, daily, or whatever, So what you do in a worldview analysis is to find out each of these categories, how people actually do it. And then we ask, why do you do that? And if they say, just because we were raised that way, we believe that, well, that's fideism. If faith only is the case, that justifies everything in the world. So this discussion is out of the question with fideism. Fideism means that faith justifies itself. Well, it may, but if it does, then the discussion is over, because everybody's got faith in something, so if that justifies their faith, that ends that. And then a motivational source, ways of deciding. Every culture, I believe Cyrus is correct, every culture has a way of deciding in options in their daily life. I don't doubt that at all. So what you meant already memorized, ways of thinking, ways of expressing, ways of acting, ways of interacting, ways of channeling or transmitting the message, or ways of deciding. Everybody in every civilization, every culture, every language has an answer to those, whether it is stated that way or not. But you can always study, ask, and transmit that. I believe the transmission, two powerful metaphors that I have used ever since it came to my mind, or didn't come to my mind because it wasn't by revelation. When the great wind talkers of the Second World War, the Indians that were trained in Catholic schools speak English, their language is the most complex language known to man. And it was then, and I don't know that anybody's falsified that since. The wind talkers were the only language that the Japanese couldn't break the code. Well, which is proof that you can transmit information across language. And you can always deceive people by transmitting. And another example, which I think is also scientifically studyable, is a translation in the World Council of Nations. They have immediate translations, and they have correctors to listen to every translation. Everybody that speaks in whatever language, immediate translation. They don't sit down and say, I have to work on that because they don't know the grammar too well. If you don't know the grammar, then you don't speak at the United Nations, and you don't listen to the United. So those two powerful examples, when we get to the issue of language, we've got two powerful proofs of linguistic structure that is translatable. That you can also, even the most complex, the Navajo, most complex language known to linguists. Now, I do believe that Knight and Pike's Togmamics, I don't know whether Dr. Smith does Togmamics, he ought to if he doesn't, but that's the only Christian view of language that I know of. But anyway, the Navajo wind talkers and the translators at the United Nations is proof that you can translate in whatever language is spoken. You can, if you understand both the receptor language and the transmitter language, you can translate it. That would make sense out of Christianity. If that's not true, then Christianity is already done. So that is very important in my estimation. In fact, I don't know how many people seem to be aware of that. But this little chart that I showed you on creation, the first to go in biblical criticism in the history of astronomy was the first 11 chapters of Genesis. And by the time we get to Darwin, then every category in the first 11 chapters of Genesis are under the gun. So we need to start, because when you lose creation as the foundation of the discussion, you're on the way to the machine, Newtonian machine, or to the non-foundational, non-judgmental postmodernism. And I can just trace that just as clearly as I'm sitting here, which is very clear to me. So if you turn to that, look at this period of what is up there. My eyes are going.
Genesis 1 through 11 in the maze of ancient Sumerian Semitic.
Okay. But that's just, we'll get, so we can get to Enlightenment and get to modernism. But I think that's fundamental. And when that is not in the discussion, then this is the biblical foundation of the biblical worldview. So the first thing to go in science and biblical criticism in the 18th, 19th century was the creation material in the book of Genesis. So if you bypass that, you don't have any foundation that's in the Bible. Mm-hmm. So you lose the whole foundation, and therefore you're into fideism. I believe it's true because I believe it. Everybody's system of life and behavior system is believed, and that makes it true. Well, if so, you're in a cosmic loony bin, so that doesn't make any sense at all. So in this exact direction of the movement from creation. Now it seems far removed. See, I don't just deal with creation in the Genesis class or in Hebrew class. It's foundational. The biblical doctrine of the Creator God is the incarnate Jesus Christ. This, you know me, that even though you can't deal with everything, you have to do proof text in the sense of picking out the prologue of John, in the prologue of Hebrews 1:4, and in Philippians 2. Now those in the kenosis passage was about Jesus self-emptying. Those middle voice, the subject empties himself. He wasn't emptied. So look at those great passages about Jesus. Who is Jesus? If he is not the Son of the living God, the origin, the creator of the universe. That's what John says. That's what Paul says in Philippians. That's what the Hebrews, he said he kept speaking to the prophets, imperfect, and he has spoken in aorist tense. He doesn't speak anymore. That ends the Book of Mormon, and then claimed to pressure biblically. Now you can claim anything you want, but you still have to have some education or some defense of that. So in that movement, I don't think there's any singly more important thing, so we can move ahead with the biblical material, and that is the foundation in the creation of the universe and the Creator. If that's rejected, or it's reduced to myth and superstition, as biblical criticism did do that, well then everybody's myth and superstition justifies itself. So you don't have any unique foundation for the discussion. You also lose the foundation for talking about the uniqueness of Jesus. So we're not saved by information. You're not saved because you have a 200 IQ or you graduated some cum laude from Harvard. You're saved by the correct knowledge of the Son of God. But if that's a lie, I do believe that C.S. Lewis is correct. Jesus is either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. And I don't see any escape, not only in the sermon, but technically, do know he's either a liar, he knew better and he was lying about it, he's either crazy, or he's who he says he is. Now, that's the life or death of a Christian enterprise, Christian education. And I think these are the most important areas concerning Christian education. I'm sorry that most people, they think Christian education is an autonomous category. No, it's not. It must be grounded in biblical revelation. What is biblical revelation? Well, it's an odd thing that it starts in very complex Hebrew. That's not a seeker-friendly method, first of all. And it starts in Genesis 1:1. That's an odd place to start. But the Bible starts there because that's the foundation of the unpacking of the rest of it. I believe that. And the whole developments in the 17th and 18th century, Chris and I debated. He started swearing. He was angry about it. But in the 17th and 18th century, we got enormous outbreak of skepticism. This is the background of Descartes. And that's Rene from Descartes. He was not Rene Descartes. It means he was Rene, whoever Rene was from that city. I knew you wanted to know that, so I wanted to tell you that before you went to bed tonight. So Rene was a mathematician. Now that's imperative to see because he was a rationalist. Like Plato and Aristotle, we can't do 1,000 years of analysis of Christian material without understanding Plato and Aristotle. Because all the debates from Augustine forward and all the debates from Aquinas forward are locked into one or two of those things. And Kant's first critique was an effort to transcend both rationalism and empiricism. What Kant did in the first critique, he not only got rid of apologetics or rational justification for God, he got rid of justification of the universe. Now Kant shows no attention, no concern about that fact. But as a matter of fact, he did both of those things. So the next development period after Kant's first critique is existentialism, all the subjective elements, phenomenology, existentialism, and all the isms that we get in the last almost 300 years, but that's all right for preacher talk and for this sleepy time talk tonight. But 250 years, that's a long time. And there are very few people we know are 250 years old. So they have to have memory if they're going to know those things. So when you come to this period we come smack dab over the developments of science.